Tony Rodrigues emerged into the public arena on September 2016 when he came out with a series of interviews on Mount Shasta about his secret space program service. Since that time, he's written 3 books about his training and the various experiences he has had. His most recent book is Beyond Sight, that details how he was trained in operational remote viewing. He's been conducting remote viewing sessions to get more info about secret space programs, and he's here today on Exopolitics Today to discuss his latest data.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Tony, to Exopolitics Today.
Hi, Dr. Salla. Thanks for having me back. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, well, it's been, getting on to 9 years since you came out. And I remember talking with you at that time about, putting your experiences down on paper and writing a book. And here you are now with 3 books behind you. How was that like to go from just being an experiencer to now actually becoming an author?
Well, you were my biggest advocate to write a book. Many people that would see my interviews, sometimes I would do other interviews and they would suggest a book. And but you were always my biggest advocate. Tony, you need to have a book together. And because of the nature of my experience, because I went through a lot of negative things, recalling the memories and speaking about them was one thing, but giving them an address to live on paper was a completely other, and it was very painful. And my first book took the better part of 6 years, and I've been doing a book a year since. But it was very difficult to articulate and get everything down. But I'm glad I did. It was also a very healing experience. It also helped me get over a lot of the trauma, and which I still am dealing with today.
Yes. I remember you telling me how difficult it was to record all your experiences for series Colony Cavalier, your first book. But definitely that's done really well. I think it was a bestseller on Amazon, as I recall.
Yes, all 3 have been bestsellers, even though series Colony Cavalier, because it was talked about for so long, it did the best. But they've all been really good. My most recent one could have had some better layout, had some issues. I did it quickly before I had to leave to do that conference in France. And I got it out in a kind of a hurry because the information was time sensitive and I disclosed some classified things in that book. And so I was in a hurry to get it out. But I'm very proud of the work that I did researching that. And with those memories that came from an actual physical trip to Inyokern, California, to that airport there. When I physically went there and found the buildings that I was in a 20 and back, not only was it very validating, but it did jog my memory. I got many new memories of the experience there that were outside of just the painful ones that I had.
Now, I know you've begun collaborating with JP, and he is, as many people know, former US Army who recently retired and has been talking about his secret space program experiences and work with covert operations within the US military, having a lot of amazing experiences. He's got photos of some of the craft he's seen, but I believe, Tony, tell me about the remote viewing collaboration you're doing with JP.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to meet JP. I was there when he did his first speaking at last year's Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection. And he's just an outstanding guy. And really, when you get to know him, he's been at the top of this field as a whistleblower, working with you for quite a long time. I don't know exactly when, but many years before I got my memories back. Recently, so I don't have a big YouTube following. In 2020, I was deleted. A lot of my interviews were deleted, and I moved behind a paywall at Patreon. So I have a smaller, dedicated audience, great people. I do live groups and things. But I began a YouTube channel for remote viewing called the Remote Viewing Collective. And we were one of the guys, Adrian, a guy named Adrian Solomon, who really helps me, he's my targeteer for remote viewing. He targeted your episode for this show, the cylindrical craft. JP describes the cylindrical craft. I believe that episode, if I'm not mistaken, was the name of it. And my targeteer challenged me with that target. And so I was blind. It was a single blind, and we were just generating content for the new YouTube channel, which is in its infancy. And lo and behold, that episode was the target. And I've been researching quite a bit. I have a lot of remote viewing peripherals that I'm trying to make available to the public this coming year that make it easier to meditate and remote view, among other things. And so I was using my system. I was using a system that I've been developing for the last year. I've put a lot of money into it, and I got a great deal of data. And not only that, but discovered that he was being watched by an extraterrestrial remote viewer and was able to remote view them. It turned into quite a treasure trove of data. And at the end of it, so much so that I was like, this is a JP target. And we were live with Adrian and I. He was monitoring the session, the targeteer, and we were recording it. And I said, this is JP. This is a JP target. And it put me in a unique situation where I could get a hold of JP and say, look, I need you to watch this video and tell me what was right and what was wrong. And there was a lot of collaborating data. And it seems like a lot of data from the remote viewing that had nothing to do with that episode, but is like what has become since then. So in real time, I saw craft in the Indian Ocean. I saw United States naval craft. I saw top secret craft, SSP craft, all underwater, interacting with each other around the Indian Ocean. So the original hit of data was JP a few days after he was taken by two people and taken to an underground location and shown these craft. 2 days later was when I originally hit. He was in a shopping mall, and I described it with great accuracy. So he was there. So he was there to collaborate or corroborate the data I found, and it was a very, very good remote viewing. I'll put it out on the YouTube hopefully later this week or coming next week.
Well, that's great. Very important to get that kind of corroboration for the kind of experiences JP's been having. And yeah, he talked about being taken to that facility, seeing 3 cigar-shaped craft, and was being told that these would be increasingly seen around the world. And so you were able to corroborate that through an independent blind remote viewing session. So that's great. Now there's another. That's not the first time JP's information has been remote viewed. I collaborated with Dick Allgaier, I guess 2 years ago now, where he set up a double-blind experiment or remote viewing. Well, actually, his targeter contacted me and set up a double-blind because Dick Allgaier is one of the remote viewers. And so this was the Atlantic space arc. And it was really amazing how much corroboration there was for the space arc data. So is this the way of the future, that you have people who have these kinds of experiences that normally are very hard to verify, but you get a remote viewing team to take a look independently and they either get data or a match or not?
Absolutely. I think that remote viewing, the techniques of remote viewing are very useful, not only for the target's sake or for corroborating data, but for our own individual sake. Like, people need to learn this the same way that you learn reading or math. You need to learn how your intuition works, the science behind it. I teach the science as well, and how the science works, and getting your head around this really puts people in touch with their own intuition. This is absolutely a necessary skill moving into the future, for sure. And it's been a huge success. I teach it through my Patreon, Talks with Tony, and it's been a huge success. It's wonderful to see people come in and know nothing about it and accurately get data within a month. We've had a lot of progress in the field and uncovered some other protocols too. But Dick Allgaier, I've spoken to on a couple occasions, and the Hawaiian Remote Viewers Guild, I presented for them some months ago. It was just a quick presentation. It turned into a 5-hour call, and there was a lot of good information. Glenn Wheaton and those guys, they're doing great work. They've been at it a very long time. Dick's a very seasoned, very talented remote viewer.
Did they ask you questions about your time at Inyokern and who trained you and the kind of things that they did? Because I
Yes.
imagine they would be very interested in that.
Yes, and I don't want to speak too much for a third party, but most people in the remote viewing field are completely unaware of Project Grill Flame. Most people think that remote viewing began at Project Stargate, but Grill Flame was actually the research and development of it, was the tail end of the program that I was in. And when I said the dates, Glenn Wheaton, who was, I believe, operational in the Army at the time, when I said the dates that I was involved, so I was taken in April. I was taken from my 20 and back in April of 1982 and put into the remote viewing research program, which was in between Grill Flame and Center Lane, Project Center Lane. And Project Center Lane began January 1st, 1983. And Glenn Wheaton in that meeting confirmed that he had never got his very first remote viewing memo that he got from the Army invitation was in January of 83, the first information he saw. So that's when it was declassified for all of the branches of government. So there was a little bit of corroboration there, but those are good guys. I presented all of my info for that, and the Inyokern information is I have a very solid ground to stand on when I talk about Inyokern.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will come back to that. So, yeah, you want to tell us now about Elena Danaan? You've been collaborating with her, and you have 7 targets that you're working on. So, yeah, you want to tell us about your work with Elena?
So Elena reached out to me recently, a few weeks ago, and she's finishing her latest book. And I don't know how many she's got. She's a machine. She can just crank out great books. She just seems to have an endless amount of content, and rightly so. But her latest book is about an alien species and about a trip and a few things that are mysterious to her that she's written about in her book that she wants corroboration about. So she tasked me with 7 targets. She sent me a PDF with 7 targets. I personally did 1 target. It was a blind target. I told her, don't tell me about it. Just give me a coordinate and I'll do it. I had Adrian Solomon, my targeteer. He did the other target and I monitored his session. We recorded them both. And then the other 5 targets I've tasked to over 40 remote viewers. And the preliminary results are astonishing. I sent some of them back to her. She's got emotional. She couldn't believe how accurate they were. And I haven't even looked through over all the data. So as of today, while we're filming this, people are still remote viewing this target, the final 2 targets of the 7. And then we'll corroborate all the data. I'll present it to Elena, and we'll see if that comes into something that we can talk about later. But it's all about her book. There were things that she wasn't sure about, and I'm speaking for her again. I'm not 100% sure, but there were things that she just wanted to have some kind of second opinion, and the early data seems to have done that. It seems to have given her corroboration.
Yeah, that's very important because Elena does have a lot of fascinating information, and we need to find ways of corroborating that kind of information. And blind remote viewing protocols seem to be a great way of doing that. Now, you wrote your most recent book, Beyond Sight, where you describe remote viewing techniques and protocols. So, I mean, as far as the original Grill Flame and Project Stargate was concerned, did they get it right that remote viewing really needs to have kind of like an alphanumeric targeting system where it's a blind process, a blind protocol, so that way you prevent any front loading by the remote viewer?
Absolutely. So that's a requirement. That is one of the requirements, that the viewer has no idea what the target is. Even in some methods, that the viewer never find out what the target is, even though that's not what I teach in my groups. You don't need the coordinate, the coordinate that's on the envelope, and you don't need the CRV method. But you do need to not know what the target is. That's just the best way to show that you were correct. And when it's a target that you don't have any proof of, now we're looking at an ET on another world, the best thing to do is to task it between many remote viewers. And when they come up with overlapping data, then those are our strong points of data. Again, in that situation, remote viewing should be considered supportive and not conclusive information. But that is exactly it. And what we've uncovered recently, and there were things. So I didn't learn just one protocol in Grill Flame in Inyokern in that year. There were several protocols, and I've been able to unpack some of the peripherals and build them already, that I will make public when they are at a point where I can market them on my new website that I'm psion.com that's come out. The audio products are done. They're not complete. I'm going to add another dozen or so on that website. But there are peripherals. There are things you can do that generate fields of electricity and fields of EM. You're basically making plays on EM fields that can make a remote viewing a little bit more accurate, along with other things, other optical stimulation and near infrared stimulation.
Now, I know there's been a kind of like rise in people who are claimed to be contactees or channelers who don't use any of the standard remote viewing protocol of a blind targeting process. They just say, "Oh well, I'm going to go and explore that Draco reptilian operations at Dulce. So I'm just going to pop in there and tell you what's going on." So what do you think's going on there? Is that imagination? Are they really getting some valid information?
So there are ways that you can use altered states of mind. You can so that's more of a clairvoyance. That's more of a clairvoyance session. You're going into a meditative state. A lot of people use something like lotus or even a microdose of mushrooms. They'll go into a meditative state and kind of search, and you can extrapolate, you can access accurate data doing that. However, it's just not bulletproof. You just can't prove it, because you will eventually, at some point, your logical cognitive mind will take over and begin to fill in the blanks. So in a blind remote viewing process, we still have that happen quite a bit, where your logical mind steps up and begins to fill in the blanks. However, you have the benefit of the doubt of not knowing what it was. So if you get close, if you say underground base is the target and the viewer has no inclination whatsoever, the last 10 targets they did were mundane, easy targets, a baseball game somewhere. And then they describe with detail an underground base with people, being operated on, and they start to go into accurate details of what we would expect to find in the target. Then that's a lot more trustworthy than somebody that says, "I'm going to go into a meditative state and search the Dulce base." And they just at that point, it can fall victim to imagination. And there's influence. There's also ways to influence it. I did an entire chapter in my book about countermeasures and blocking, and that involves providing false targets for the remote viewer. And we've had some episodes of it in my group. I published my book. I think I ruffled feathers in the community, in the remote viewing community, which is big. And we had some blocking going on. We had some blocking. So one thing I haven't wrote about or spoke about is the techniques around it. So we did a remote viewing for Jean Charles Moyen. Veronica, very talented remote viewer, and myself did a target for Jean Charles. And in that remote viewing, we stumbled upon a method to counteract blocks. And so that is there. There are a few other ways. There's a bit of a cat and mouse when it comes to countermeasures of remote viewing.
Okay, so countermeasures, they are kind of security protocols that a facility sets up in place to deal with any intrusive remote viewing kind of experiments that monitoring their base, and these security measures, you say the masking, I mean, that can be the blocking, that can be very effective, and
That's
deceiving the remote viewer as well, thinking that what they're seeing is really what's happening, but in fact it's just a cover.
You can perturb it's hiding the real target in a field of false targets.
Okay. So your Inyokern experiences, I mean, you've described those previously, and the Inyokern was where it wasn't just you being taught remote viewing protocols, but you were also, as a child, injected with, I guess, chemicals. I mean, that they chemically enhanced your abilities. Now, has that had any kind of long long-term effect, or was it really just designed to kind of like maximize your RV skills or learning at the time? And once you've learned all the protocols, now you can use them anytime.
I believe that the project that I was in Inyokern, which was technically Grill Flame, but they had closed Grill Flame and used the leftover money to run us dozen kids that they thought were clones, but we were from 20 and back. It was actually extraterrestrial technology. That was a research. So they were researching the maximum that they could do. So they did many different protocols with us. He was also researching and was successful in predicting financial markets with it. I believe there were some residual effects. I believe that I had precognition, daily precognition for a few seconds as a side effect of what I went through. They did experiment with different drugs. It was more about mind programming us, wiping us to go into a hypnotic state on command words, trigger words, and so that we could go into and have a blank mind and then do the targets. I believe that was one of the methods. There were chemicals, but when we actually got to the remote viewing phases outside of the programming stage of what I went through on Inyokern, everything that they gave us chemically seemed to be a lot milder. So during the programming phase, the drugs they were giving us would completely disorient. They were hallucinogenic. They were completely disorient us. But after that phase, when the programming was done and he went into remote viewing, they managed our diet. They managed our sleep greatly. They did give us some things, but you really couldn't feel, they were things that they were giving us to experiment with that you really didn't feel anything. So it was about technique overall. And they were researching several techniques, of which I still have a few that I'm going to disclose in coming books and talks.
That's great. So you want to tell us about the peripheral technology based on ancient monuments. What is all that about?
So in my book, I put a chapter called Psychoenergetic Monuments in Beyond Sight. And I discovered that all of the obelisks that were quarried at the Aswan granite site in ancient Egypt were arranged where they lie now, many of them in a very distinct setup, a very distinct arrangement, and near water, near rivers of cities. And I deduced that from the work of Dan Willis, who followed up on Marcel Vogel's work of programming water with thought. I thought that what might be what they're doing. It turns out that the arrays are useful for many things, and that there are modern arrays that do not have obelisks. When I get into the harmonics of how they would do that, and I've still been working on it after my book has been released. I just noticed the distances and saw there's a coincidence there that needs to be discussed. But now that I've gotten into the harmonics and the science of it, both talking to friends of mine, both Dan Winter and his information, and Dan Willis, as well as my own research, I found that by putting a harmonic into an obelisk and converting it to piezo effect, you can have a lot of influence on what's nearby. And when we talk about that's in the hertz range. So humans are in the hertz range. So you can broadcast certain frequencies on the hertz range through an obelisk that has a certain amount of quartz and ferrous component and get an effect. You can heal, you can meditate, you can excite, you can maintain concentration. I can create these fields. I built smaller obelisks. They're going to be listed on Psion.com. I'm working on the project now. I should have the first 5 or 6 marketable by the end of the month. But they work. I have them in my home. I've had people come over and tell me what you think, and they work. It creates a subtle field that makes it easier. Instead of a harmonic like a binaural, it's actually cellular. You're getting a static electricity component that's having a cellular effect. The other thing about the obelisk is that I found it after a great deal of research, a year of research, that it was in the kilohertz range, that the ancient Egyptians, and they couldn't have been Egyptians. They had to be somebody that had a laboratory at some point. So a high technology civilization that lost their ability, that had the knowledge, because there's no way you could have the knowledge to construct one of these to do what they do. But to generate a wave would be in the kilohertz range, and it would be about 3/4, a little more than 3/4 of a mile long for the wave to complete its oscillation, also can cause microcavitation in water and purify it and oxygenate the water. And so we see them at that exact distance from the Nile. We see it in Rome, from the Tiber River. We see it in Florence, Italy, in Astana, Kazakhstan, the Washington Monument, on and on and on. The St. Louis Monument. They're all things that can generate a wave in the kilohertz range that can cause microcavitation in the water and purify it, kill the microbacteria, and make the water more important. So then I got into the history of Rome. I researched the history of Rome, and in the 1400s, that they were in fact dumping sewage into the Tiber River, I believe. Correct. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, guys. The Tiber River was deeply polluted, and it was a major problem in Rome in the 1400s. The obelisk was completed in 1550, and by 1575, the water purification wasn't a problem. The Tiber River was still badly polluted, but the aqueducts inside Rome were clean, and they had cured it. So the same people that erected the obelisk were in charge of the water in the city of Rome. So there are many possibilities. It's not just one device. It's not just an obelisk with a quartz piezo content. Is not just a one thing. Doesn't have just one use. There are many, many uses for this, and I've reconstructed these. We see the Dans coming out with crystals. Many people have Vogel crystals and do it. I've gone a different route so that I can scale up the volume of the field that it generates, and so my obelisk can be quite big.
Now, you did a remote viewing with Jean Charles Moyen, and he says that he bilocated into a space ark that was found under the Nazca Plains of Peru. And so he gave you a target. You didn't know what that target was, but that's what his experience involved. And so I know that Veronica did a remote viewing, and we have a glyph that she wrote of the remote viewing there. So you want to tell us about that session and the remote viewing that was done to corroborate what Jean Charles Moyen was experiencing?
Absolutely. So it's been a while since it was in October of last year. Jean Charles came for the Odyssey Sedona conference, and afterwards he wanted to do a target. And Veronica, I believe it's veronicasspacemystic.com is her Patreon, is a very talented remote viewer and psychic. She does psychic work. She does remote viewing. Very, very talented, very consistent. She was tasked with the target, and I was tasked with the target. I filmed mine in a virtual space, and I had close to the same results. I had very corroborating data. This was a blind target. And then she did hers on paper, and it was very corroborating. So with what Jean Charles remembered seeing when he bilocated, and we both described it, a lot of the data was exactly the same. There was a great deal of overlap. And then when Jean Charles saw her data, he said it corroborated almost exactly what he saw. So it was a very, I'm saying it's been a while since I looked at my data, but there was a Toronto component as well. But there were definitely a cave with a craft or some sort of high-tech structure underground was prevalent in all of the data.
Yes, it's very interesting that he was, he bilocated there, that he was able to see the space ark, and it was corroborated. And this is not the first space ark. I think he said he's seen 8 so far around the world. So quite remarkable, as is the method by which he's able to travel to these locations and confirm them.
We looked for the one in the Atlantic and came up with, everybody unanimously agreed there was one down around Cuba that we saw something there. But I got to tell you that the space arcs in themselves are a difficult target to remote view. So there is a consciousness involved, and the same things that I'm talking about with countermeasures could be possible. But the space arc, to willy-nilly go and remote view a space arc, really takes a structured approach, a structured, definitive approach. You can't just test this on, on a Saturday night around a Ouija board and get a good remote viewing for this. It's a very difficult target. Every time we've remote viewed an arc, it's been difficult. So Jean Charles was the tasker on this one, and he had physically or bilocated and been there. So that may have been something to do with it, but we had great data that time.
Now, there's childhood trauma and traumatic memories that are held in different areas of the body. So this is, why is that relevant to remote viewing?
Well, it's a different subject altogether, but your own physical well-being and your mental well-being and your emotional well-being affects your ability to remote view. It affects your ability to do everything, really. But it's when we're talking about remote viewing, your energy that's in you. And recently, we were talking off camera. I think a whole world, since the new administration has started pulling the rug on a lot of these things, we're seeing fraud. We're seeing a lot of people being upturned. So the status quo is being upturned, and I think that it's contagious. The energy and the panic from so many people involved globally is contagious, and a lot of people are going through similar things and going through energetic changes, including myself. And the last few weeks have been very difficult. You and I talk off camera. We're in a state of energetic flux globally right now. I must have talked to half a dozen people that told me the same thing. They ask, "How you doing?" I go, "Man, not so good. I'm struggling. I'm going through a tough time right now, energetically and emotionally." And it seems to be commonplace. So I went and saw an energy healer. I got a massage energy thing. I live in Sedona, so they're everywhere. And the person told me, he says, "Hold still. The childhood memories are the psoas muscle, the muscle that connects at your hips, your torso to your legs, basically the psoas." She said she was going through and doing an energy thing and got to that muscle and said, "Look, now I just want you to concentrate on, you're 4 or 5 years old. This is where childhood trauma is usually kept." And I had a major moment where I had clear memories of things that I had forgotten about my father and I that didn't make sense my whole life, the way things that my father went through my whole life and treated me, and I didn't understand why, and the memories of why came. And it really was therapeutic. It was really helpful. There were suppressed childhood memories there. And it let me know that my father was a little bit more of a hero than I thought he was. And I just want to leave it at that. After that session, there 2 or 3 days lingered where I was just getting rebalancing. And I've done remote viewing sessions since then, and it's been a vast improvement. So childhood trauma is stored in other parts of the body. So my next book that I'm working on is about all the people I've worked with to recover long-term memories, people that suspect they've been involved in the SSP programs. And I have I'm kind of aggregating that data, and I'm writing a next book out of it. And it dawned on me that long-term traumatic memory is not just in your mind. It's in your energy field, and it's stored in different parts of your body. Your muscles store an energetic, when somebody says something and you have a physical reaction, it's because a traumatic memory is stored there from some other time. And my own experience of going and seeking help and clearing that out was groundbreaking. And so that's why I mentioned it. It's a very important thing, and I'm going to be an advocate for it in the future.
Yeah, we are definitely in the midst of a challenge because, as you said, the old energies are being cleared out. I mean, this new presidential administration is definitely overturning a lot of long-established practices, challenging the deep state, and there's a lot of stuff that's coming up. And as we talked off air previously, it was like, yeah, I'm definitely going through it. I mean, I've got this bad persistent cough that's lasted several weeks now. Been trying to deal with that, doing different things, but I've seen some energy healers as well, and they point to past life traumas. Now, you didn't really talk about past life traumas, but though there are past life traumas, and it's interesting. When I look at these past lives and what I experienced in the trauma, I find echoes in my kind of physical life, which is very interesting. So I don't know if that's something you've done any research on, past life traumas, and how they are echoed in events and experiences in our current life.
I didn't say it specifically, but some of the events in Project Star Maker may be directly associated with a past life. So that book is already confusing enough. That entire subject matter is very confusing. I was in they ended up with a technology for me to do the remote viewing by drugging me and putting me having near-death experiences on a monthly basis for better than a year and a half. And during that, I was having out-of-body experiences and connecting to information from the future in my life and from the past and possibly in past lives. And the book is written intentionally to be confusing so that people can understand kind of what it's like to get memories back, how it's all over the place, and emotions are always a big factor. And past life experiences may be some of the things in Project Star Maker. With the 20 and back and with everything that I've been through and what's going on since I've been public, I've just had so much to process in my own life that I haven't really given a lot of time to past life memories.
Now, this new book, you mentioned that you're working with different people who have had 20 and back experiences. Is this going to be just you presenting their testimonies to the general public, or is there going to be a kind of an analysis or a framework of what it is? What's the overriding kind of theme for these accounts?
We live in a time when more people are learning about extraterrestrials and the reality of it, as they call them, UAPs. More people are waking up to the facts, and they are slowly going to get their way. Even though the people that are championing disclosure right now on the mainstream front and at Congress are not talking about the 20 and back phenomenon, they will eventually get there. And this book spells out. I'm just aggregating all the data. I've talked to a few thousand people about possibly being in a 20 and back. And when I really sit down with them and make a timeline and really get to a serious discussion with details of their life, most of them seem to have be genuine in the fact that they were taken and interacted in these. There are common denominators in cases. A lot of people haven't. They've had other forms of contact, or some people, are mistaken altogether. But a huge number of them have common denominators. And I just want to present the data. I want to aggregate the data because we're seeing many different programs taking people, or many different purposes for people being taken in the secret space programs with this technology, the 20 and back technology. It's not just one group. And I just want to make this as a guide for people that are new to the subject matter so they can understand it better, because it's very difficult to explain, for one, and then make it something that people can use if they suspect that they've been in a 20 and back, so that they have some kind of resource for it. And I've always looked at all the data that I've aggregated over the years and thought, man, there's just a lot here, and there's just not enough researchers to go around.
Now, I know that there's been a number of different researchers that take contrasting positions when it comes to the motivation of extraterrestrials. Some say that all the extraterrestrial visitors to our world are benign and benevolent. Others take the opposite tack of, they're evil, they're demonic. So in a post-disclosure world where it's officially announced that extraterrestrials are real, they're visiting us, what do you think is going to happen to this kind of distinction between good and evil? Is it what do you think is going to be the way in which this is presented to the public?
This has been a hot button subject for me, and I've spoken to Danny about possibly presenting this information in the UK at the upcoming Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection conference in May in the UK. But we've been programmed as a whole from day one for hundreds of years by our government. We've been programmed to believe in good and evil in a certain way, in a very polarized way. We see things as good or evil. And the reason that is so that you can rally an army. It makes perfect sense. If you can convince a crowd of people that the people on the other side of the land, the country you're on, are evil, then they could take up arms and you can rally an army. It was all about recruitment. It still is. And so it's very easy when we see it now in the political sphere, we see it in the Middle East. People are convinced that the other people are evil, that they've done this and they all should be put to death. The good and evil aspect is a programming. It's a psychological conditioning that we have. And the reality isn't like that. I get a lot of comments on my videos, what a great guy. And I'm not a great guy. I'm a normal guy. I have good days and bad days. I have a temper. I do things that could be construed as bad. I do things that are very good. I'm normal. And this is the extraterrestrials as well. There are extraterrestrials that will never assist humanity. So they just don't see us on their level. They don't see us as what they are. There could be a hive mind. It could be something, extraterrestrials that just don't like us. And it's their right to. So we would call them evil, but they're also not evil because they exist. And, you know, they have a mom that loves them kind of thing. And that's a metaphor. Like some of them don't. But there are extraterrestrials that are never going to get along with humanity. And they're not evil. That's what I'm saying. I want to put a pin in the grenade of being stoked to hatred. So we don't need to hate ETs that don't want to interact with us or assist us. Likewise, there are ETs that come off as very good, but that doesn't mean they're always going to see us helping us in their best interest. They're just normal and their perspective is good. So we can't worship them as our saviors or as angels. They're just friends, right? Good or evil. So some friends in my life, I have great friends. You're a great friend of mine, Doc. Some friends of mine have been very good to me most of the time and done some very bad things to me. They're not evil and they're not good. They're just friends. And that's in a post-disclosure world, we are really going to have to figure out a way to get rid of that psychology to where they're always evil, or these people are always evil, these people are always good, because it opens up the door to be completely naive, thinking that they're good, and also completely unjust, thinking that they're always evil. My experience in space was that the Ceres Colony Corporation would do business with anybody, and that ET species, inner Earth species that had bad diplomatic relationships with other species that had bases in the solar system would use us as a medium, as a middleman. So people that they had embargoes, they were not supposed to trade any data or goods with, they still needed to open up a line of trade, and they would hire the Ceres Colony Corporation to come and take a shipload of stuff up there to their enemies. They're not good or evil. It's perspective and it's opportunity. And so that being said, everybody goes, but there is evil, Tony. The other thing is we're going to see, right now we're seeing a disclosing of funding. It may get to the satanic elites, the things that I witnessed in Seattle. Those may be addressed publicly. Those people are by definition evil. But it's a technology. They do it in the form of technology. They're mistaken. What we see as evil is really only a mentality that sees itself unconnected to the rest of us. In other words, a very evil person, a satanic elite, doesn't see himself connected through the rest of humanity through source or through the universe the way it is. He sees himself as separate from all of us. And so we become a crop or a flock or whatever, something to be victimized because he doesn't empathize. The reality is that we are all connected. We're all part of one singular consciousness and one singular unified field universe. And that's good. So that's our definition of good. So people that are empathetic and want to help everybody out, that's what we see as good. And people that are evil, we would see them, they just feel disconnected, like somehow what they do isn't going to harm themselves by harming somebody else. And it's a lie. They're living a lie. The reality is that we are all very much connected. So in a post-disclosure world, I might be on a long rant here. In a post-disclosure world, we're going to have to open up a mindset that lets us do business with ETs that we love and that we hate.
Okay, very important point. I think the raw material, when they distinguish between service to self and service to other extraterrestrials, was very helpful in escaping that kind of dualistic thinking. That
Well, and also once you adopt that, once you can let go of your hatred towards evil or your naivety towards good, it really is liberating, and it really does make you see things in a much more accurate light. And it's one of the techniques I teach in remote viewing. So we're objective observers. When we look at a certain thing, I don't want the viewer to assign good or evil because they ultimately don't know.
Now, you mentioned earlier on a Psion.com website that you created. So you want to tell us why you created that website? What's the importance of it?
I originally started out making harmonics. So my sister, I needed one for meditation for my groups and my Patreon, a meditation, a binaural, and I purchased the software to make that. And I worked with Dan Winter and I worked with Dan Willis about the frequencies that have effects. And I found some frequencies that are absolutely stellar. I have the ability to make binaurals, bilaterals, isotronics. They use subliminal affirmations, white noise, brown noise, and music. And I put all these together into audio, 30-minute audios, and those are listed for sale. A few of them are listed for sale, but they've had stunning results. I've made one for remote viewing to assist in remote viewing for a brainwave state, and then others for a successful mindset. My sister had asked me to do a not quit smoking one for her husband. And so it's in the works. It's actually roughed out and almost done. But we've had such a tremendous results. The binaural, a bilateral, you don't even need headphones. I can just put it on in the background and you can still go into a meditative state or a gamma state if you're working around the house. The successful one are good. The harmonics and the science of that has translated into the piezo broadcast of the miniature obelisks that I've made. And those are going to be available on Psion as well. And those in conjunction with the harmonics in your listening to have a very profound effect on your consciousness and on your state of being. So when you're doing a remote viewing session or just meditating, it's a very profound, very fast way to get into a meditative, a theta state or any other brainwave state. The third phase of that is going to be a Ganzfeld technology that I remember they used on us in Inyokern. So a Ganzfeld technique, sensory deprivation with a certain color spectrum of lights and brief flashes of near infrared. It's a technology that I remember experiencing, and we went out of body. So it's my goal to create a system that you could set up in your home, sit in your chair, and be able to have a very profound meditative state, even an out-of-body state. So I don't want to claim out-of-body until we've tested it and done it. But if we're remote viewing, a lot of people are remote viewing these days, which is great. A lot of people are teaching it, which is great. I want to see it proliferate. And these are peripherals that have had a great impact on our accuracy here. Not just me. I've already used it on a few people, and the technology is sound. We see many similar technologies coming out.
Yes, I think that's very, very helpful, those kind of tools to prepare one, whether it's deep meditation or developing remote viewing skills. Now, one of the new whistleblowers that's kind of like really gotten a lot of mainstream attention is this Jake Barber, who was a former helicopter pilot, and he described being involved in several UFO crash retrieval operations, and one of those involved an egg-shaped craft. Now, what I found very interesting about his testimony was that he said that that the military would use psionics. They would have a psychic who would be tasked with summoning one of these egg-shaped craft, and once it was summoned, then it would be forced to land, or it would crash, or it would be shot down, and that's how they were bringing down at least some of the craft. So I hadn't heard of that before. So yeah, what do you know of that, using psionics to bring down or summon extraterrestrial spacecraft?
Well, this is the first I've heard of it in his testimony. I purposely don't watch a lot of testimonies, but I will say that I early on back in the 80s they were classified as psychoenergetics, so the ability to perturb a target or affect a target at range, not just view a target but actually interact with it. And it seems like they could be projecting a false target that these craft would want to see to come down to, and then snare it in their trap. That sounds like what you're saying, that they're projecting a way to attract these craft and then capture them. Is that right?
Well, he was using the term summoning, that these psychics would summon the craft somehow. They would interact with the navigation system, whatever beings were on that craft, and maybe it was along the lines of what you were saying, some kind of false target or false landing coordinate.
Projection.
But I think he was kind of emphasizing that would be like they would take it over, and that the crew would be like, well, what's just happened? We've lost control of our navigation and propulsion.
That's a very high level of psiability then. So that I would suspect a great deal of people. I would suspect a large team involved with that and with their own peripherals. I have messed with, there are drugs that, dopamine inhibitors that can greatly enhance your ability. However, they're no fun. You just kind of walk through life like a zombie. So I don't recommend them at all. But there are many military versions of this that, and like I said, when you get into really perturbing EM fields and static electricity fields to where you can tune into the correct brainwave state on a cellular level and with the audio and with a static cloud, for lack of a better word, you can increase your abilities greatly and at certain times of day. And so that seems like it would be something possible. I know that they were having tremendous results in psychoenergetics back in the 80s, in the early 80s, and all through the 90s. They were very active in perturbing things at the target, interacting with the target, even talking about teleporting things from the target to their location. So it's it's progressed much farther than what we're doing out here on the own with just remote viewing.
Now, I know that you have organized several events, but now you are organizing a large conference, Rise of the Guardians. So you want to tell us when is that, where is it, and who's going to be speaking?
Well, I talked, JP will be there. Rion Deroin is the host of this one. He lives here in Sedona. He's a close friend. I trust him with my life. And then JP agreed to come out. There's some really great speakers, Barbara, Jason Stiles, Tone Millard. Those are all people that I know personally. Jimmy Church will be coming out. And we're going to present this crowd behind the Team Light really doesn't have a lot of the secret space program testimonies exposed to them. So we're going to give that information. I presented at one of their events last year in Austin, Texas, in, I believe, April of last year. And a lot of people were shocked by my testimony. I had never heard it before. So we're going to come out. We're going to have JP is going to be there. And I'll kind of do a back and forth. Like I'll get some time on stage and then interview JP. And this is here in Sedona at the Sedona Arts Center, Performing Arts, I believe, Center. And it's a very big venue, very beautiful place, stage with an auditorium. It's a beautiful conference. And this is great. There's going to be some activities afterwards at the Humankind Center, I believe. They're going to have after parties. And so Sedona's a beautiful place. It's a great excuse to come out and see a top tier vacation destination. So this is a really good conference, and it's coming up quick. So that's the other thing.
Okay, well, there's still plenty of time for people to register. It is a fascinating lineup, and as you said, JP will be there, and I've been working with JP since 2008, and he's the real deal, and so he may have some surprises. He definitely is taking some interesting photos and videos these days, so hopefully we'll see what happens in the near future. Now, there's some other big conferences that are coming up. The Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection Conference. There's going to be an event in Britain from May 10 to 11, and also in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think that's September 18, 19, something like that. So, yeah, what do you want to say about that Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection Conference?
I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of the best ones. I'm going to disclose everything that I've been working on this last year. I'll go through the technologies of remote viewing and kind of the subject matter of the next book. I'm really looking forward to that. In England, I think that the conference circuit in America is saturated. I think there are a lot of people that are, we're in the midst of some disinformation. Some conferences have turned it into a business, and some people have stepped up to speak that are really not great information, and it's saturated. So to find a really quality conference that has a lot of actual information they're disclosing is rare. A lot of conferences just put give anybody a mic and put them on stage. And so we're saturated. We're seeing it in the turnouts. Excuse me. We see it in the turnout. But Danny Henderson put this one in the UK because I don't think there are many conferences of this type in Europe. And it seems like whenever I'm involved with one in Europe, they sell out very quickly. So the European audience seems to be primed and ready for these conferences to happen there. And so and a lot of them, it's brand new information. So it's awesome to present all of the evidence behind my testimony to a new audience and just kind of see their eyes light up. So some people, they really take it home and they dwell on it for a long time when we disclose what's going on with the 20 and back technology, the life extension technology. And so that one, and then hers is going to be in Charlotte. The next one, I'm looking forward to that. The Odyssey conference is one I've thrown on. Odyssey.com is the conference that I threw in Sedona last year. And we're going to move it into a show format. So I'm working in step with something called Humankind. I think it's humankind.com. And it's the Humankind Center. A good friend of mine named John Strayer. We're working together. He's created a venue, and we've got a studio, and we're gonna bring people in. I'd love to have you come out, Doc, and be on the show. It's going to be like a Gaia. We have a budget to do an episode a month, and it's going to be like a Gaia. We're going to film it, and there's a streaming service involved. And so the Odyssey Sedona conference is basically turning into that, where we're going to sell tickets for people to come to the studio and watch the recordings, and then it'll be on a streaming platform and then sold off to a larger streaming platform. So we'll get a mainstream audience. And I really want to dictate, I really want to emphasize exactly where we're at in disclosure. So many people just think they're fast ships that can fly into space and in the ocean. That's it. They don't realize the ramifications of that. They don't give it a lot of thought, that means we can get to the stars very easily as well.
Now, I know you're a trained remote viewer. You obviously have been using your skills in a number of scenarios. So here's one I want to just throw up for you. Where do you think our planet will be, and where will you personally be in terms of 5 years from now?
Wow. So I haven't looked 5 years from now per se. I probably should. I think we're going to get. I think we're going to get an eventful disclosure. So I think they're going to discover evidence and give it to us publicly so people can adjust to it. It may happen in the next 5 years. I really think that it's going to be revolving around the private sector space programs. So Virgin or SpaceX, I think they are going to go into space. This is my hunch, and through kind of techniques. And I don't want to go on the record and say that I'm prophesizing anything, but I think the way they're going to do it is to go to the moon or go to Mars and discover a structure and then disclose that, and then have open contact. Like, now that you found it, we can come to you and finally talk to you. And kind of give the bad guys a way out, because it doesn't do any good if everybody just wants to put everybody in jail. You have to give people that have the keys to disclosure an off ramp to get out of here. So the idea is that we have far more to gain by a disclosure alone than by having a disclosure where everybody that's kept it a secret goes to jail. We have to give those people an off ramp. We have to just move ahead, because mankind will grow up really, really fast once we see how other civilizations live. And so I think there's going to be a space mission. I think there's going to be a discovery, and then it'll happen really fast. That's been my hunch all along of how it would happen. I really don't subscribe to a reason for them to have a false alien invasion, even though that also makes sense, but it seems like that would be kind of an apocalyptic scenario. So I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to get space missions that let us know that there is life out there.
I think that's pretty accurate, actually. I know that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have already said that the goal is to have manned missions to Mars by 2028. So by 2030, I think, the possibility that these manned missions will have happened and that they've discovered stuff, that would give a plausible way to disclose extraterrestrial life without having to kind of like expose the cover up, even though a lot of us would like that to happen. But it's kind of like start from scratch and just act as though, oh, well, then look at this. These kind of like structures on Mars are extraterrestrial after all.
Yes. And, when we talk about the 20 and back, when we talk about a lot of other things, that's what we are here for. So the people that really are curious can seek us and find this information here. They can find my book. They can find Elena's and many other people, and go to the information they subscribe. The starseed phenomenon is real. People have come here to assist in this situation. What's happening? That's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here, so that the official narrative can go along for the people that really have a hard time around the truth. Most people are just not curious about space. Let's just face it. They just care about their own relationships and their own status of where they're living their life, and that's it. And that's a great thing. It's innocent, but most people just could not be bothered with thinking about trillions of worlds in space. Many people can. I've always been one that can. And I know that once we're aware of what goes on up there, and once we have access to that information, our way of life is going to change. I also wanted to say that we're going to end up with a world where ETs can visit us, and ETs that don't like each other can visit us. So they're going to have areas they're going to have to be areas that ETs are allowed, that not everybody's allowed. So it kind of dovetails into, I think that the loss of liberty in a smart city is very real. And I think that people that go into a smart city have to have the option to leave it. However, a smart city does offer a safe place for an ET to visit and not worry about crime, because there's no rights, like there's complete surveillance. And so I think we're going to get areas of the world that are like that can host visitors and guarantee their safety. I think that's really kind of how they're justifying that between the elites. And I think we're going to see areas of the world that work just that way. So I'm ever an optimist, and I think that there's ways for the good and bad, not the really bad, but the good and bad things to kind of coexist, and we can move forward. So I had a talk with Elena and Danny on Danny Henderson's channel about the implants. I'm not a big fan of Neuralink, but implants can be done responsibly and can open the door to communication and to a lot of things. So we're just going to have to let go of the boogeyman factor and stop hating the witches of technology. We're going to have to allow for people to not embrace technology, and we're going to have to allow for people to embrace it. And that's the world to come.
Very interesting. So you feel that the artificial intelligence that is growing leaps and bounds, that there's going to be some kind of natural balance that is found where the most egregious aspects of it will be kind of like prevented from happening, and the more productive, beneficial aspects will be allowed to proliferate, and people can choose whether they want to have implants, live in smart cities, and so forth.
So the genie's out of the bottle on AI. So the Maple Street Learning is in AI development right now to create AI content and adaptive media to teach people much faster than they are. I've been working on it for better than 18 months. It's been a couple of years now I've been working on it, and we have made some really good breakthroughs. We have a standalone AI in development that works. AI genie is out of the bottle. It's the way of life now. It's not going anywhere. The AI, it's who has the better AI is going to control the future battle spaces, the space race, the future technologies, chemical and material development, everything. AI is just going to have to be controlled. And so the sovereign rights that we enjoy right now are going to have to be defended. And so it's okay to suspend rights in a certain area. You were the one that I got the information about the smart city, what they call them, tech cities, that the United States passed where they could have tech cities. And that makes perfect sense when you talk about that, where they can suspend constitutional rights. It makes perfect sense if it's just in a 100-acre or 200-acre space that people have the option of going into and leaving. So that's the thing. You have to be able to leave. And that creates a safe place for extraterrestrials to visit. They don't have to worry about security. Does an extraterrestrial visit one of these? Do they visit downtown Detroit? So there has to be, we have places that we live under the same terms. We have places that are safer for us on our own planet that we don't go to. So this has to be something that happens. So the technology is already here. And so we just have to not lose our own identities in it. And that's why I think remote viewing, which ultimately is not about remote viewing the target. Remote viewing is about learning how to use your intuition correctly. That's the technique. That's the muscle that gets developed. So anybody that becomes a expert remote viewer can use their intuition several times daily correctly, accurately. And that intuition is our own connection to source, to our own connection outside of time space, however you want to word it. And that's something that we have to develop and not lose as technology gets thrown upon, as a technology really, because post-disclosure is going to expose us to technology we never dreamt of.
So you want to tell us about your website and how people can find it, and what you're doing, or if people want to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So my website is tonyrodrigues.com, and you can link to my Patreon. You can email me, but it's hard to get at me through that email. It has links to my books and my background story. And my Patreon is where all the groups take place. So I do remote viewing groups twice a week. I do a remote influencing group once a week. And there is another professional remote. So I'm up to 5 groups of people. And we meet every week. We meet every single week. And then another one once a month. I do a Q&A type thing. So JP and I are also putting on a webinar. Of course, it'll be done by the time that this airs. But I do a Q&A on my Patreon, and that is all linked through my website, tonyrodrigues.com. The other website that is brand new is Psion, PSION.com. And that's got a few of the binaurals that are up there. Some of the best sellers are up there right now. And those are amazing. I'm going to be adding, over the next 6 months, I'll be adding many products on there, including the obelisks and the peripherals for the remote viewing. It'll all go there. That's where that technology is going. And I'll take requests and things through there to build those binaurals. They are world-class technology, world-class quality, the binaurals, because I've been able to learn from my friends Dan Willis, Dan Winter, Elena Danaan, many other people. I've been able to learn from those people science because I didn't go to school for it. So I was able to learn some very, very good things and tune the binaurals and the brainwave state to really optimal conditions. So that's what that site is, and that's what I'm working on. My next book will be coming out hopefully by the Charlotte GSIC, that I'll have that one out. And onward and upward, man. So that's it. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, Tony, for coming on the show and sharing your latest research. It really is fascinating, and I wish you all the best for the future and for your Rise of the Guardians conference.
Thank you. And odyssey.com. And anyhow, I don't want to run a bunch of promo stuff. Thanks, Doc, for having me. It's been an honor to be here. I always love talking. You're the best.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.